Preoperative care including the high-risk surgical patient. Introduction. The stress of major surgery can lead to increased oxygen demand by up to 40%. Inflammatory changes due to cytokine release, endocrine responses, hypercoagulability and redistribution of fluid between compartments may last several postoperative days. The purpose of careful preoperative planning is to minimize the unwanted effects of these physiological changes. Systematic history taking, examination and investigation at the preoperative clinic should include not only an assessment of functional reserve but also the formulation of advice on optimization to best cope with the anticipated operative stress. Primary care physician records and hospital notes are useful sources of baseline information. Ideally, a multidisciplinary team approach, including the primary care physician, specialist nurses, physiotherapist, dietitian and perioperative physician, is utilized. This allows optimization of chronic conditions, facilitates weight reduction and smoking cessation, and allows coordination of prehabilitation and postoperative rehabilitation needs. The anesthetist and surgeon must plan the safest anesthetic technique and operation for the patient. A simple questionnaire can identify risk factors for patients undergoing surgery that will require specificity tests or optimization. Patients with severe comorbidities or undergoing high-risk surgery should be referred to specialists to quantify and reduce perioperative risks. The risks of surgery and anesthesia and the effects of comorbid conditions should be discussed so that the patient can make an informed decision. Patients should be given advice on preoperative fasting times, adjustments to regular medication and specificity premedication at the preoperative visit. To enable the list to run smoothly on the day, key personnel involved in the list, surgeon, anesthetist and senior theater staff, should be involved in planning the list order. The National Patient Safety Agency adaptation of the World Health Organization's checklist recommends a team brief before the start of each list, which is also a valuable opportunity to share information with the theater team and improve the safety of anesthesia and surgery. Preoperative plan for the best patient outcomes. Filled circle. Gather and record all relevant information. Filled circle. Optimize patient condition. Filled circle. Choose surgery that offers minimal risk and maximum benefit. Filled circle. Informed consent of the patient. See Chapter 14, Filled circle. Anticipate and plan for adverse events. Filled circle. Adequate hydration, nutrition and exercise are advised. Patient assessment. History. Taking a thorough past medical history, surgical history and systemic inquiry should be documented, including important negatives. Table 21.1. The history of past surgery and anesthetic events can reveal the problems one may face during future procedures, e.g. intra-abdominal adhesions for planned laparoscopic surgery, a difficult airway or succinylmethonium apnea. The use of recreational drugs and alcohol consumption should be noted as they are known to be associated with adverse outcomes. A full drug history and list of allergies should be documented. Social history, ability to communicate and mobility are important in planning admission, discharge route and rehabilitation after surgery. Examination. Patients should be treated with respect and dignity, receive a clear explanation of the examination undertaken and be kept as comfortable as possible. A chaperone should be present, especially for intimate examinations. This should be part of a local guideline or policy. Key conditions in past medical history. Cardiovascular. Filled circle. Valvular heart disease. Filled circle. Ischemic heart disease, angina, myocardial infarction, coronary stents. Filled circle. Hypertension. Filled circle. Heart failure. Filled circle. Dysrhythmia. Filled circle. Peripheral vascular disease. Filled circle. Cardiac devices, i.e. permanent pacemaker. Respiratory filled circle, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease filled circle, asthma filled circle, respiratory infections filled circle, obstructive sleep apnea symptoms. Gastrointestinal filled circle, peptic ulcer disease and gastroesophageal reflux filled circle, liver disease. Genitourinary tract filled circle, urinary tract infection filled circle, renal dysfunction filled circle for females, last menstrual period, pregnancy, breastfeeding status. Neurological filled circle, epilepsy filled circle, cerebrovascular accidents and transient ischemic attacks filled circle, Parkinson's disease filled circle, multiple sclerosis. Psychiatric disorders filled circle, cognitive function filled circle, anxiety or depression. Endocrine, metabolic filled circle, diabetes filled circle, thyroid dysfunction filled circle, pheochromocytoma filled circle, porphyria. Locomotor system filled circle, osteoarthritis filled circle, inflammatory arthropathy, i.e. rheumatoid arthritis filled circle, disorders of muscle, i.e. muscular dystrophy, myasthenia, myopathy. Hematological filled circle, bleeding disorders filled circle, personal or family history of deep vein thrombosis and pulmonary embolism. Filled circle, objection to blood product transfusion filled circle, hemoglobinopathy, i.e. sickle cell disease. Infection filled circle, human immunodeficiency virus, hepatitis, tuberculosis filled circle, other, i.e. MRSA, COVID-19, drug-resistant organisms. Previous surgery and anesthesia filled circle, problems encountered, i.e. difficult airway, society alert, sexamethonium apnea. Filled circle, family history of problems with anesthesia, i.e. malignant hyperpyrexia. Examination filled circle, general. Positive findings, even if not related to the proposed procedure, should be explored further. Filled circle, surgery related. Type and site of surgery, with reference to imaging and investigations. Filled circle, systemic. Comorbidities and extent of limitation of each organ's function. Filled circle, specificity. For example, suitability for positioning during surgery or to plan airway management. Examination is especially important in symptomatic individuals and at a minimum should include cardiorespiratory examination and airway assessment. Specifically, look for signs of heart failure, valvular heart disease, peripheral vascular disease and respiratory disease. Medical examination. General. Anemia, jaundice, cyanosis, frailty, nutritional status, sources of infection, teeth, feet, leg ulcers, height, weight and BMI. Cardiovascular. Pulse rate and rhythm, blood pressure, heart sounds, bruits, jugular venous pressure, peripheral edema, exercise tolerance. Respiratory. Respiratory rate and effort, chest expansion and percussion note, breath sounds, oxygen saturation at rest and exertion, consider PEFR. Gastrointestinal. Abdominal masses, ascites, bowel sounds, hernia, genitalia. Neurological. Consciousness level, cognitive function, sensation, muscle power, tone and reflexes. Airway, assessment. Mouth opening, neck extension, Mallampati score, thyromental distance, jaw protrusion, scarring to mouth or neck, dentition. Airway assessment. The difficulty encountered when performing airway maneuvers, i.e. hand ventilation, intubation and front of neck access, can be predicted to some extent by simple examination. Failure to assess and plan airway management can have fatal consequences. The patient is assessed for filled circle Modife Mallampati class, table 21.3, filled circle mouth opening greater than 3 cm, figure 21.1, Filled circle thyromental distance greater than 6.5 cm. Filled circle thyrosternal distance greater than 12.5 cm. Filled circle ability to protrude the jaw, figure 21.2. Filled circle ability to extend the head at the atlantooccipital junction, figure 21.3. Table 21.3 Airway Assessment, Mullumpati Test as modified by Simpson and Young. Grade 1, 287 fosses, pillars, soft palate and uvular scene. Grade 2. Fosses, soft palate with some part of uvular scene. Grade 3. Soft palate scene. Grade 4. Hard palate only scene. When more than one of the above tests are abnormal, the chances of experiencing difficulty in obtaining and securing the airway become greater. Poor dentition, facial hair, upper airway tumors, scarring, infections, obesity and neck size are also important factors that will affect the airway management plan. Previous anesthetic charts or alerts carried by patients for a difficult airway are invaluable sources when assessing a patient. Investigations. Guidelines produced by the UK's National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE, set out the investigations needed for various categories of elective surgery and American Society of Anesthesiologists, ASA, score of the patient. The following are some of the tests done preoperatively, although not all are done routinely or are recommended by NICE. Filled circle full blood count, FBC. An FBC is needed for major operations, in the elderly and in those with anemia or pathology with ongoing blood loss and chronic disease. Hemoglobin A1C, HbA1c, level. This should be measured in patients with diabetes who have not had it measured in the last 3 months. Filled circle sickle cell test. Not routinely offered, but in cases of suspicion of a sickle crisis or a family history of sickle cell disease, a sickle cell test is needed. Filled circle urea and electrolytes, U and E's. U and E's are needed before all major operations, in patients over 65 years of age, in patients with cardiovascular, renal or endocrine disease, or if significant blood loss is anticipated. They are also needed in those on medications that affect electrolyte levels, e.g. steroids, diuretics, digoxin, nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, intravenous fluid or nutrition therapy, and in those with endocrine problems. Filled circle liver function tests. These are indicated in patients with jaundice, known or suspected hepatitis, cirrhosis, malignancy, alcohol excess or poor nutritional status. Filled circle clotting, coagulation screen. This is needed if a patient has a history suggestive of a bleeding diathesis, liver disease, eclampsia or cholestasis, is on antithrombotic or anticoagulant agents, or has a family history of a bleeding disorder. It should be noted that the effects of antiplatelet agents, low molecular weight heparins, LMWHs, and newer agents affecting factor XA cannot be measured by routine laboratory tests. Filled circle electrocardiogram, ECG. This is required for patients over 65 years of age or symptomatic patients with a history of rheumatic fever, diabetes or cardiovascular, renal or cerebrovascular disease, with or without severe respiratory problems. It will also depend on whether the surgery is minor, intermediate or major, as described in NICE guidance. Filled circle chest radiograph. Not routinely offered unless there is concern on clinical examination. Filled circle echocardiogram, echo. Consider in those with heart murmurs who are symptomatic or in those with signs of heart failure. Urine tests. Only consider microscopy and culture of midstream urine if infection would influence the decision to operate. Filled circle beta human chorionic gonadotrophin pregnancy test. Women of childbearing age should be asked sensitively about their pregnancy status, as this will affect the surgical plan and consent. Pregnant patients must be consented for the risk to a fetus that surgery and anesthetic pose, and obstetric advice sought. In addition, on the day of surgery the woman should be consented for a urine serum pregnancy test. Filled circle others. Filled circle venous bicarbonate. For patients who have screened as being at high risk for obstructive sleep apnea (OSA), followed by former sleep studies if significant OSA is a concern. Filled circle arterial blood gases. A low-cost tool that can give quick and vital information in acute or chronic severe respiratory conditions, acid-based disturbances in conditions where there is a changing milieu, e.g. immediately before kidney transplant. Blood group and cross-match if expected blood loss greater than 500 milliliters. Filled circle methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, MRSA, swabs. Filled circle coronavirus 2019, COVID-19, polymerase chain reaction, PCR, swabs. Filled circle spirometry. Filled circle cardiopulmonary exercise testing to assess FTNS for high-risk surgery. Filled circle specialist radiological views is sometimes required. If imaging is going to be needed during surgery, this needs to be planned in advance. Common preoperative problems and management. Specific medical problems encountered during preoperative assessment should be corrected to the best possible level. Many patients with severe disease will need to be referred to specialists. The referral letter should contain all the details, including history, examination and investigation results. Cardiovascular disease. Perioperative cardiovascular complications are frequent. Patients who can climb a flight of stairs without getting short of breath, having chest pain or needing to stop are likely to tolerate a wide range of surgeries with an acceptable risk of perioperative cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. However, at preoperative assessment it is important to identify those patients who have a high perioperative risk of a major adverse cardiovascular event, MACE, and to try to reduce this risk. Patients at high risk are those with ischemic heart disease, IHD, congestive cardiac failure, arrhythmias, severe peripheral vascular disease, cerebrovascular disease or significant renal impairment, especially if they are undergoing major intra-abdominal or intrathoracic surgery. Ischemic heart disease patients with angina that is not well controlled should be investigated further by a cardiologist. The indications for coronary revascularization in patients awaiting surgery are the same as at any other time. Pharmacological protection is indicated. Patients established on beta blockers and statins should have their medication continued perioperatively. Initiating statins preoperatively should be considered if not already prescribed. Most long-term cardiac medications should be continued over the perioperative period. Angiotensin-converting enzyme (ACE) inhibitors and receptor blockers are often omitted 24 hours prior to surgery to prevent intraoperative hypotension, and restarted the next day for most surgery. In patients with IHD, the cardiac and coronary reserve can be evaluated using a stress test, stress ECG, stress echo, myocardial scintigraphy. The tests have a high negative predictive value but a relatively low positive predictive value. If the test is negative, the patient is unlikely to have IHD. Conversely, if it is positive, the chances of the patient actually having IHD are not necessarily very high, but there is a need. For further investigations such as coronary angiography or cardiac computed tomography. Recently, measurement of the coronary fractional flow reserve during coronary angiography using a pressure vial has made it possible to identify coronary lesions that have the largest impact on myocardial perfusion. After a proven myocardial infarction, MI, figure 21.4. Elective surgery should be postponed for 3 to 6 months to reduce the risk of perioperative reinfarction. Ischemic changes. can be seen on ECG even if the patient is not symptomatic. Silent ischemia, silent me. These merit discussion with the cardiologist. Hypertension. Prior to elective surgery, blood pressure should be controlled to less than 160/100ths of a millimeter of mercury. If a new antihypertensive agent is introduced, a stabilization period of at least 2 weeks should be allowed. Heart failure. Left ventricular failure is the end result of several conditions, including IHD, hypertension, cardiomyopathies and valve dysfunction. Decompensated heart failure puts the patient at risk of multi-organ failure. Those with ejection fractions of less than 35%, and in whom the failure is undiagnosed or its severity underestimated, are at highest risk. The patient's functional capacity needs to be assessed and surgery may have to be delayed for investigations such as an echo and/or for optimization of medical therapy. B-type natriuretic peptide is a useful marker and can be prognostic. Drugs used in chronic heart failure can have significant implications for perioperative care, including intraoperative hypotension, beta blockers and probably ACE inhibitors, unless renal perfusion is to be significantly affected, should be continued. A left ventricular ejection fraction of less than 35% should be discussed with a cardiologist and optimized. Cardiac resynchronization therapy devices may be considered, depending on the QRS duration. Drug-eluting coronary stents, they, V2, V5, V3, V6. Primary percutaneous intervention is the treatment of choice for acute coronary syndromes, and many patients receive stents and are on dual antiplatelet therapy for 12 months. If surgery is absolutely necessary within the period of dual antiplatelet therapy, the management strategy should be decided jointly by the surgeon, cardiologist, anesthetist and patient, as it is essential to consider the balance of risk of continuing antiplatelet agents, with the risk of increased bleeding, and stopping them, with the risk of stent thrombosis. Figure 21.4. Dysrhythmias. In patients with atrial fibrillation, AF, beta blockers, digoxin or calcium channel blockers should be continued in order to control rate. New AF or atrial flutter should be investigated and treated. These patients should be considered for cardioversion as restoring sinus rhythm can improve cardiac output by 15%, figure 21.5. Patients with an abnormal rhythm on ECG, for example tachycardia, bradycardia or heart block, should also be discussed with a cardiologist, figure 21.6. Symptomatic heart blocks and asymptomatic second, morbid 2, and third-degree heart blocks, if discovered at the preoperative assessment clinic, will need cardiology consultation and potentially temporary or permanent pacemaker insertion. Warfarin in patients with AF should be stopped 5 days preoperatively to achieve an international normalized ratio, INR, of 1.5 or less, which is safe for most surgery. The newer anticoagulants such as dabigatran, direct thrombin inhibitor, or rivaroxaban, apixaban and edoxaban, direct factor XA inhibitors, do not have antagonists and must be stopped preoperatively, generally for 2 to 3 days in patients with normal renal function and longer when renal function is impaired. Alternative anticoagulation is not required in the perioperative. Period unless the risk of stroke is high, assessed using the CHA2DS2 VASc, congestive heart failure, hypertension, age is greater than or equal to 75 years, diabetes mellitus, stroke or transient ischemic attack, vascular disease, age 65 to 74 years, sex category, SCO. Decisions on bridging therapy should balance the risks of stroke and bleeding. Implanted pacemakers and cardiac defibrillators. Checks and appropriate reprogramming should be done preoperatively by specialists and advice followed. Monopolar diathermy activity during surgery may be sensed by the pacemaker as ventricular fibrillation or a paced beat. Therefore, cardioversion and overpace modes must be turned off and switched back on after surgery, or converted to ventricle paced, not sensed with no response to sensing, VUC mode. Bipolar diathermy should be made available at surgery. Valvular heart disease. While anesthetic management is altered to achieve hemodynamic stability in moderate valvular diseases, patients with severe aortic and mitral stenosis may benefit from valvuloplasty before elective non-cardiac surgery. Appropriate referral to an anesthetist and cardiologist should be made. An echo is required in symptomatic patients with a new murmur. Patients with known significant valve pathology may benefit from a recent echo, especially if their clinical status has changed. Standard intervals for surveillance echo can be guided by local cardiology policy. Patients with prosthetic valves are normally monitored with surveillance echo at intervals. In patients with mechanical heart valves, warfarin needs to be stopped preoperatively and bridging anticoagulation given to prevent valve thrombosis. Bridging options include infractionated heparin infusions or LMWHs and should be done under guidance agreed with hematology. Bridging therapy should continue postoperatively until the patient is re-established on warfarin with a therapeutic INR but must be balanced with the postoperative bleeding risk. Thrombin inhibitors and factor XA inhibitors are not licensed and should not be used in patients with mechanical valves. Cerebral vascular disease patients who have suffered a cerebrovascular accident have been shown to have a higher rate of MACE postoperatively. This is highest in the FRST 3 months after a stroke. The urgency of surgery needs to be discussed with the surgeon, anesthetist and a stroke physician. Ideally, elective surgery is postponed until MACE risk stabilize after 9 months. The bleeding versus thrombosis risk of continuing dual antiplatelet therapy needs to be considered. Respiratory disease. Postoperative respiratory complications, such as pneumonia, are a major cause of morbidity and mortality, especially after major abdominal and thoracic surgery. A patient's current respiratory status should be compared with their normal state. Patients with severe disease are at risk of pneumonia and respiratory failure in the postoperative period. Severe disease would include patients with a forced expiratory volume in the FRST second, FEV1, of less than 30% of predicted value, dependence on oral steroid treatment, home ventilation or oxygen therapy or a PaCO2 level of greater than 6 kPa. Patients should continue to use their regular inhalers until the start of anesthesia. Brittle asthmatics may also need extra steroid cover. Encourage the patients to be compliant with the medications and stop smoking. Information should be provided to indicate perioperative risks associated with smoking. Stopping smoking reduces carbon monoxide levels and offers the patient a better ability to clear sputum. Evidence suggests that preoperative inspiratory muscle training significantly improves respiratory muscle function in the early postoperative period, reducing the risk of pulmonary complications. Regional anesthetic techniques and less invasive surgical options should be considered in severe cases. Elective surgery should be postponed until acute exacerbations are treated. The patient should be referred to a respiratory physician if filled circle there is a severe disease or significant deterioration. Filled circle major surgery is planned in a patient with significant respiratory comorbidities. Filled circle right heart failure is present, dyspnea, fatigue, tricuspid regurgitation, hepatomegaly and edematous feet. Filled circle the patient is young and has severe respiratory problems, may indicate a rare condition. Gastrointestinal disease. Regurgitation risk patients undergoing general anesthesia or sedation have a risk of regurgitation of stomach contents and aspiration pneumonia. To reduce this risk, patients should fast preoperatively. This should be clearly explained to the patient. 6 hours for solids or non-clear fluids, e.g. milk, 2 hours for clear fluids and 4 hours for infants consuming breast milk. Prolonged fasting is detrimental to the patient, so should not be encouraged. Patients with hiatus hernia, obesity, pregnancy or diabetes are at higher risk of pulmonary aspiration, even if they have been fasted appropriately before elective surgery. Clear antacids, H2 receptor blockers, e.g. ranitidine, or proton pump inhibitors, e.g. omeprazole, may be given at an appropriate time in the preoperative period to reduce stomach acidity. Liver disease. In patients with liver disease, the cause of the disease needs to be known, as well as any evidence of clotting problems, renal involvement and encephalopathy. Elective surgery should be postponed until any acute episode has settled, e.g. cholangitis. The presence of ascites, esophageal varices, hypoalbuminemia or sodium and water retention should be noted, as all can influence the choice and outcome of anesthesia and surgery. Patients with cirrhosis undergoing major surgery have a very high mortality. The model for end-stage liver disease, MELD, can be used to predict mortality of cirrhotic patients undergoing non-transplant surgery. If alcohol addiction is the etiology, then reduction of alcohol intake should be encouraged, but abstinence must be medically supervised to prevent delirium tremens. Genitourinary disease, renal failure. Underlying conditions leading to chronic renal failure such as diabetes mellitus, hypertension and IHD should be stabilized before elective surgery. Appropriate measures should be taken to treat acidosis, hypocalcemia and hyperkalemia of greater than 6 millimoles L. Arrangements should be made to continue peritoneal dialysis or hemodialysis until a few hours before surgery. After the final dialysis before surgery, a blood sample should be sent for FBC and UNEs. Patients with chronic renal failure often have chronic anemia that is well tolerated. Therefore, preoperative blood transfusion is often not necessary. Optimization of the hemoglobin is best guided by the renal team. Urinary tract infection. Uncomplicated urinary tract infections are common in women, while outflow uropathy with chronically infected urine is common in men. These infections should be treated before embarking on elective surgery where infection carries dire consequences, e.g. joint, significant hospital mortality, nutritional replacement. For emergency procedures, antibiotics should be started and care taken to ensure that the patient maintains a good urine output before, during and after surgery. Endocrine and metabolic disorders, malnutrition. Body mass index, BMI, is weight in kilograms divided by height in meters squared. A BMI of less than 18.5 indicates nutritional impairment, and a BMI below 15 is associated with significant hospital mortality. Nutritional support for a minimum of 2 weeks before surgery is required to have any impact on subsequent morbidity. If a patient is unlikely to be able to eat for a significant period postoperatively, this can be anticipated and alternative nutritional support must be planned. Obesity. Morbid obesity can be defined as BMI of more than 35, other definitions exist, and is associated with an increased risk of postoperative complications. Patients should be made aware of the risks involved and advised on healthy eating and taking regular exercise. If possible, surgery should be delayed until the patient is more active and has lost weight. If this fails, prophylactic measures need to be taken, such as preventative measures for acid aspiration and deep vein thrombosis, DVT. Also, that is unrecognized has been shown to be associated with a higher incidence of MACE in comorbid patient groups. Identification of those at higher risk by using a clinical scoring system, such as the Perioperative Sleep Apnea Prediction, PSAP, score, can rationalize referral for formal sleep apnea studies. Urgency of surgery may preclude full investigation and treatment preoperatively. Patients with severe OSA require 6 weeks of nocturnal continuous positive airway pressure, CPAP, used preoperatively to reduce their risks. Associated risks need to be explained prior to the surgery and an appropriate anesthetic technique planned with postoperative monitoring. Diabetes mellitus. Diabetes and associated cardiovascular and renal complications should be controlled to as near a normal level as possible before embarking on elective surgery. Any history of hyper and hypoglycemic episodes and hospital admissions should be noted. For elective surgery, an HbA1c of less than 69 millimoles per mole is recommended. Lipid-lowering medication should be started in patients who are in a high-risk group for cardiovascular complications of diabetes. Patients with diabetes should be FRST on the operating list and their antidiabetic medication adjusted as per local or national guidance, as they will miss a meal preoperatively. Although tight control of blood sugar is not needed, the patient's blood sugar levels should be checked hourly. Variable rate intravenous insulin infusion, VRIII, should be started for patients with diabetes on insulin undergoing major surgery or if blood sugar is difficult to control for other reasons. Replacement. For emergency procedures, antibiotics should be started and care taken to ensure that the patient maintains a good urine output before, during and after surgery. Endocrine and metabolic disorders. Malnutrition. Body mass index, BMI, is weight in kilograms divided by height in meters squared. A BMI of less than 18.5 indicates nutritional impairment and a BMI below 15 is associated with adrenocortical suppression. Patients receiving oral adrenocortical steroids should be asked about the dose and duration of the medication to determine the need for supplementation with extra doses of steroids perioperatively so as to avoid an Addisonian crisis. A patient taking greater than 5 mg prednisolone equivalent within a month of surgery will require supplementation at induction and postoperatively. Neuroendocrine tumors, including pheochromocytoma, carcinoid, gastrinoma, vipomas and insulinoma, have specific treatments that must be started preoperatively in liaison with specialist endocrinology physicians. Hematological disorders. Anemia and blood transfusion. Patients found to be newly anemic, hemoglobin less than 130 grams per liter, with an expected operative blood loss of greater than 500 milliliters, should be investigated for the cause of their anemia. Any vitamin or iron deficiency should be corrected before proceeding for elective surgery. Chronic anemia is well tolerated in the perioperative period where less than 500 milliliters blood loss is expected, but where possible should be corrected. Preoperative transfusion may be considered rarely for elective patients when guided by a hematologist. Local policy should agree which procedures require a preoperative, group and save, or cross-matched blood sample. Some patients may refuse blood transfusion, for example a Jehovah's Witness. In such a case, during the consent process discussion should include which blood product and or device system, e.g. cell salvage, reinfusion from drains, is acceptable. The discussion should extend to other areas, for example whether refusal of transfusion would apply in life-threatening situations. As in all consent processes, the discussion and outcome should be clearly documented. Thrombophilia factor V. Leiden and deficiencies in antithrombin 3 and protein C and S increase the patient's thrombosis risk. The patient will need special discussion with a hematologist to tailor their venous thromboembolism prophylaxis. For all other patients, a DVT risk assessment should be made preoperatively and precautions planned as per local or national guidance. Risk factors are included in Table 21.4. The progesterone-only contraceptive pill should be continued. However, the risks of continuing the combined pill, slight increased risk of significant thrombosis, should be weighed against the risks of an unplanned pregnancy. Consider stopping estrogen-containing oral contraceptives or hormone replacement therapy 4 weeks before surgery. Nice guidance, see further reading. Bleeding disorders. Bleeding disorders such as hemophilia, von Willebrand disease or thrombocytopenia are best discussed with hematology preoperatively. Neurological and psychiatric disorders. Anticonvulsants and anti-Parkinson's medication must be continued perioperatively to help early mobilization of the patient, and patients should be planned early on a theater list to reduce starvation times. Parenteral medication plans can be set in place preoperatively if there is potential for a prolonged kneel by mouth period postoperatively. Lithium should be stopped 24 hours prior to major surgery but can be continued for minor surgery with careful fluid management and UNE's monitoring. The anesthetist should be informed if patients are on psychiatric medications, such as tricyclic antidepressants or monoamine oxidase inhibitors, MAOIs, as these may interact with anesthetic drugs. Case-by-case decisions with a psychiatrist must be undertaken as stopping irreversible MAOIs safely may take many weeks of planning under psychiatric supervision. Risk factors for thrombosis. Filled circle age greater than 60 years, filled circle obesity, BMI greater than 30 kilograms per square meter, filled circle trauma or surgery, especially of the abdomen, pelvis and lower limbs. Filled circle total anesthesia time greater than 90 minutes, filled circle reduced mobility for more than 3 days, filled circle pregnancy, puerperium, filled circle varicose veins with phlebitis, filled circle drugs, e.g. estrogen contraceptive, HRT, smoking, filled circle known active cancer or on treatment, significant medical comorbidities, critical care admission. Filled circle family, personal history of thrombosis, e.g. deficiencies in antithrombin 3, protein S or C. Musculoskeletal disorders. Muscular disorders have serious implications and require a tailored anesthetic approach. They include muscular dystrophies, myotonic dystrophy and myasthenia gravis in a personal or family history of malignant hyperpyrexia. Rheumatoid arthritis can lead to an unstable cervical spine with the possibility of spinal cord injury during intubation. Therefore, flexion and extension lateral cervical spine radiographs should be obtained in symptomatic patients, figures 21.7 and 21.8. Assessment of the severity of renal, cardiac, valvular and pericardial involvement as well as restrictive lung disease should be carried out. Rheumatologists will advise on steroids and disease-modifying drugs so as to balance immunosuppression, chance of infections, against the need to stabilize the disease perioperatively. Stopping disease-modifying drugs can lead to flare-up of the disease. In patients with ankylosing spondylitis, in addition to the problems discussed above, techniques of spinal or epidural anesthesia are often challenging. Patients with systemic lupus erythematosus may exhibit a hypercoagulable state along with airway difficulties. Physical fitness. Functional physical fitness can be judged by the ability to tolerate metabolic equivalent tasks, METs, table 21.5. 1 MET is equivalent to the oxygen consumption of an adult at rest, approximately 3.5 milliliters per kilogram per minute. Different tasks are assigned a number of METs. If the patient is able to perform greater than 4 METs, e.g. climbing at least 1 flight of stairs, they are accepted to proceed for low-risk surgery in the USA and Europe. However, this depends on a subjective assessment of the ability of a patient and may be overestimated by them. The Duke Activity Status Index, DASI, is a less subjective patient questionnaire. An estimate of the patient's peak oxygen consumption, VO2 peak. Can be calculated from their point score. Although it correlates with cardiopulmonary exercise testing, CPET, some patients who score poorly on DASI go on to score well on CPET. An objective measure of FTNS is required for high-risk surgery. Cardiopulmonary exercise testing, CPET, is the gold standard measurement of a patient's FTNS. The oxygen consumption, VO2, and carbon dioxide production, VCO2, of the patient are measured while they undergo a 10-minute period of incrementally demanding exercise, usually on a cycle ergometer, up to their maximally tolerated level, figure 21.9. CPET is based on the principle that, when a subject's delivery of O2 to active tissues becomes inadequate, anaerobic Metabolism begins. Lactate is buffered by bicarbonate and the resulting CO2 increases out of proportion to the escalation in physical difficulty in O2 consumption. The anaerobic threshold is the O2 in milliliter per kilogram per minute at which this occurs. Peak oxygen consumption is also measured. This is the end product of a subject's combined respiratory, cardiac, vascular and musculoskeletal FTNS, and subjects with either in at below 11 milliliters per kilogram per minute or a O2 peak below 15 milliliters per kilogram per minute are at higher risk of morbidity and mortality after major surgery. Metabolic equivalent tasks, METs. Filled circle 1 MET equals 3.5 milliliters O2 per kilogram per minute, oxygen consumption by a 40-year-old, 70 kilogram man at rest. Filled circle 1 MET equals eating and dressing. Filled circle 4 METs equals climbing 2 flights of stairs. Filled circle 6 METs equals short run. Filled circle greater than 10 METs equals able to participate in strenuous sport. Patients who are found to be unfit can be enrolled in prehabilitation. This involves supervised exercise over 4 to 6 weeks with the aim of improving the patient's fit and reducing their risk profile. Where CPET is not available, the low-cost incremental shuttle walk test, ISWT, is an attractive option. It depends on the patient's ability to walk at increasing speed over a flat surface. Patients who fail to achieve 350 meters on the ISWT have been shown to be at higher risk for esophageal surgery. It correlates well with VO2 peak but does not identify all low-risk patients as it is subject to patient motivation and is affected by sex, age and height. Consent. Consent is a key part of preoperative care. The process of consent has evolved over the years and, in the UK, is determined by relevant acts of parliament, legal judgment and the development of specific guidance. Consent is considered in detail in Chapter 14. Assessment of risk. Despite more comorbid patients presenting for surgery, the perioperative mortality has decreased significantly over the last half-century, especially in recessorec countries. In a published systematic review in The Lancet by Bainbridge et al., 2012, perioperative mortality has declined from 10,603 per million, 95% confidence interval, Chi 10,423, 10,784, in the 1970s to 1176 per million, 95% Chi 1148 1205, in the 1990s to 2000s, p less than 0.0001. However, there remains a subgroup of patients who are at higher risk of morbidity and mortality after surgery. Patients who have a predicted mortality is greater than or equal to 5% should be considered as high risk. It is estimated that, although the high-risk group accounts for less than 15% of all surgical procedures, they contribute to more than 80% of all perioperative deaths in UK. What causes these patients to be at a high risk of death and complications after surgery? After surgery tissue destruction, blood loss, fluid shifts and changes in temperature, pain and anxiety result in increased demands for oxygen delivery to the tissues. This demand increases from an average of 110 milliliters per minute, M2 at rest to 170 milliliters per minute, M2 in the postoperative period. Most patients meet this increase in demand by increasing their cardiac output and tissue oxygen extraction. Patients who are unable to meet these demands, as a result of a limited cardiorespiratory reserve, are at a risk of oxygen debt. Occult hypovolemia resulting from fluid shift or blood loss can further impair oxygen delivery. Splanchnic vasoconstriction to compensate for this may result in gut ischemia. Those with coronary or cerebrovascular disease are also at a higher risk of myocardial ischemia or stroke. Factors contributing to risk. Risk is a complex interaction of multiple factors that can be classified into patient and surgical factors. Patient factors are listed in Table 21.6. The elderly, although not independently at higher risk, not only have more cardiac, pulmonary and renal disease but also requires surgery 4 times as often as the rest of the population. Around 10% of the population over 65 are frail, with increasing incidence associated with age. Multiple body systems lose their inbuilt reserves in the elderly. The type of surgery contributes independently and is listed in Table 21.7. This risk increases if the surgery is performed as an emergency. Often, the underlying condition requiring surgery itself may be associated with an increased risk of complications. For example, a patient with severe peripheral vascular disease resulting from heavy smoking may need a femoral popliteal bypass graft and can be expected also to have significant COPD and IHD. Moreover, when mortality by type of surgery is adjusted for patient risk factors, the apparent hierarchy of surgical risk may change. The average mortality risk for an individual patient undergoing thoracic surgery, for example, is likely to be higher than the average risk for that same patient undergoing vascular surgery. Complications associated with the latter are nevertheless more frequent because vascular patients have greater medical risk factors. Table 21.6 Patient factors that predispose to high risk of morbidity and mortality. Filled circle previous severe cardiorespiratory illness, e.g. acute myocardial infarction, COPD or stroke. Filled circle late-stage vascular disease involving the aorta. Filled circle age greater than 70 years with limited physiological reserve in one or more vital organs. Filled circle extensive surgery for carcinoma. Filled circle acute abdominal catastrophe with hemodynamic instability, e.g. peritonitis. Filled circle acute massive blood loss greater than 8 units. Filled circle septicemia. Filled circle positive blood culture or septic focus. Filled circle respiratory failure, PO2 less than 8 kPa or FiO2 greater than 0.4 or mechanical ventilation greater than 48 hours. Filled circle acute renal failure, urea greater than 20 millimoles or creatinine greater than 260 millimoles, L. Surgery specificity estimates of risk. High risk, cardiac risk greater than 5%. Open aortic major vascular, peripheral vascular urgent body cavity. Intermediate risk, cardiac risk 1 to 5%. Elective abdominal carotid, endovascular aneurysm. Head and neck, major neurosurgery arthroplasty, elective pulmonary major urology. Low risk, cardiac risk less than 1%. Breast dental, thyroid ophthalmic, gynecological reconstructive, minor orthopedic minor urology. Risk prediction. The key to managing patients effectively is the identification and accurate quantification of the risk, and subsequent measures taken to minimize it. Realistic estimates of risk are the cornerstone of informed patient consent and shared decision-making. The patient and the surgeon may choose a less extensive or even a non-surgical option when the risks of the definitive procedure are deemed to be too high or unacceptable. The Royal College of Surgeons of England has recommended that patients who are predicted to have greater than 5% mortality risk should have active consultant input in all stages of their management. Surgical procedures in those with predicted mortality of greater than 10% should be conducted under the direct supervision of a consultant surgeon or anesthetist, unless the consultants are satisfied with the seniority and competence of the staff managing these patients. Moreover, those with a mortality greater than 10% should be managed in the critical care facility postoperatively. The identification of patients who will benefit the most from these interventions is important, not only for the improvement of outcomes but also for the effective allocation of resources. A number of scoring systems have been developed over the years with the aim of identifying high-risk patients. Table 21.9. American Society of Anesthesiologists system. The ASA scoring system is widely used. Although not designed to be used as a risk prediction score, it has a quantitative association with the predicted percentage of postoperative mortality. Table 21.10. However, it does not account for the patient's age or the nature of the surgery in the term systemic disease. In ASA, grading introduces an element of subjectivity. Examples of each physical status added in 2015 aim to reduce this. The POSSUM score. The POSSUM, Physiologic and Operative Severity Score for the enumeration of mortality in morbidity, and its modifications, PPOS-SUM, CRPOS-SUM, are used to predict all-cause mortality in postoperative critical care patients as well as non-cardiac morbidity. Operative mortality by American Society of Anesthesiologists, ASA, grade. I. Healthy. 2. Mild systemic disease. Mild systemic disease, no functional limitation. 3. Severe systemic disease, definite functional limitation. IV. Severe systemic disease, constant threat to life. V. Moribund patient unlikely to survive 24 hours with or without operation. A. Emergency operation. Lee's Revised Cardiac Risk Index. Lee's Revised Cardiac Risk Index, RCRI, uses objective indices based on weighted scores pertaining to surgery and comorbidity. This stratifies cardiac risk but is not designed to predict mortality. Table 21.11. ACS NSQIP score. The American College of Surgeons, ACS, National Surgical Quality Improvement Program, NSQIP, surgical risk score estimates the chance of a complication or death after surgery for more than 1,000 different surgical procedures. It compares the patient's risk with an average person's risk. It is a web-based tool done preoperatively. The risk is calculated based on surgical procedure and 19 patient-specific preoperative risk factors. Choosing the right operation for the high-risk patient. There are situations in which the selection of one surgical technique over another may be significantly influenced by patient risk factors. Some procedures are not primarily high risk but may become so in unsuitable patients. Laparoscopic surgery, for example, has come of age as a preferred technique for patients predisposed to postoperative respiratory complications, but its effect on cardiac physiology means that the same may not apply to patients at risk of cardiac complications. The expanding demand and indications for minimal access surgery are now pushing the boundaries of intraoperative physiological tolerance. Robotic prostatectomy. In some laparoscopic colorectal procedures require a pneumoperitoneum with steep Trendelenburg, head-down, positioning for several hours, figure 21.10. This can be associated with adverse cardiovascular and neurological complications, such as myocardial ischemia and increased intracranial pressure in the high-risk group. This risk may be minimized by attention to patient selection. Role of critical care and outreach services. Reports from the National Confidential Inquiry into Patient Outcome and Death, NCEPOD, show that the majority of postoperative deaths in the UK occur more than 5 days after surgery. Admission to a critical care unit allows for early treatment of complications in a level of care that is difficult to deliver in the ward environment during this crucial period. Common complications include myocardial ischemia, cardiac, respiratory or renal failure and sepsis. Perioperative ME is associated with a high mortality, 15 to 25%. Critical care uses invasive cardiac monitoring and vasoactive drugs to help provide cardiac stability postoperatively to minimize ischemia and guide fluid management to prevent cardiac failure. Postoperatively, 1.5% of patients develop lower respiratory tract infection after surgery, with a 30-day mortality of greater than 20%. Respiratory failure, which is defined as PAO2 less than 8 kPa in air, PAO2, FiO2, the ratio of arterial oxygen partial pressure to the fraction of inspired oxygen, less than 40 kPa, or the inability to extubate a patient 48 hours after surgery, is by far the most significant of these and is associated with a mortality of 27 to 40%. Elective non-invasive ventilation, chest physiotherapy and intensive spirometry should be considered for patients at increased risk of respiratory complications. These are commonly delivered on the critical care unit, figure 21.11. The high-risk surgical population accounts for 80% of postoperative deaths, but only about 15 to 30% of high-risk surgical patients are admitted to a critical care unit at any time following surgery. Work by the National Emergency Laparotomy Audit in the UK is seeking to standardize treatment of this high-risk group with many recommendations, including admission to critical care where predicted mortality is greater than 5%. In the last decade, the role of critical care has been expanded to the concept of critical care without walls. The Intensive Care Outreach Services, ICORS, grew from a recognition that there were many patients in hospital who are at risk of being critically ill and that early identification of these patients using early warning scores could allow for early intervention. The outreach team functions to bridge the gap between the critical care unit and ward. Arranging an elective theatre list. The date, place and time of operation should be matched with the availability of appropriately skilled personnel. Appropriate equipment and instruments should be made available. The operating list should be distributed as early as possible to all staff who are involved in making the list run smoothly, Table 21.12. If this is done electronically, familiarity with the computer system is required. A critical care bed should be prearranged for high-risk cases. Elective list order should prioritize patients who are vulnerable to long starvation times, e.g. children and patients with diabetes. For a prompt theatre start, planning a straightforward case FRST can utilize time waiting for pre-procedure imaging on the second case, e.g. breast wire insertion, or confirmation of a postoperative critical care bed for a high-risk case. List planning using a surgeon's average operation times for a procedure rather than generic estimates leads to better list utilization. Staggering admission times can improve patient satisfaction but reduces flexibility for, on the day, changes to list order. Ward, theatre and specialist nursing staff. Filled circle, filled circle, filled circle, filled circle, filled circle. Anesthetic and surgical teams. Radiology and pathology involvement, rehabilitation and social care workers. Administration and scheduling team. Specific personnel in individual cases, e.g. cardiac devices team. Preoperative assessment for emergency surgery. Figure 21.11a. In emergency surgery, the principles of preoperative assessment should be the same as in elective surgery, except that the opportunity to optimize the condition of the patient is limited by time constraints. The urgency of surgery should be graded, e.g. by using the NCEPOD classification of intervention, and emergency theater cases should be prioritized accordingly, i.e. immediate, within minutes, urgent, within hours, expedited, within days, or elective, timing to suit patient, hospital and staff. Medical assessment and treatments should be started even if there is no time to complete them before the start of a time-critical surgical procedure. Some risks may be reduced but some may persist. Whenever possible, these need to be discussed with the patient during the consent process. Optimization before urgent surgery can be more effective in a critical care environment, and patients may need to be admitted to critical care preoperatively. The likelihood of a high-risk emergency patient requiring postoperative critical care should be identified and discussed with the duty critical care physician. Summary Box 21.3. Preoperative assessment for emergency surgery. Filled circle. Start. Similar principles to that for elective surgery. Filled circle, filled circle, filled circle. Constraints. Time, facilities available. Consent may not be possible in life-saving emergencies. Organizational efforts. For example, local, national algorithms for the treatment of patients with multiple injuries.